Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. James Jimmy Hills, the host of Java with Jimmy here. We are here for a special noon edition of Java with Jimmy this afternoon to chat with someone that's not a stranger to the Java Cafe. She is, I think I said earlier in the show, a decades-long advocate who has had impact in this city, this state, and actually internationally. And we named that, I believe it's in the House, approval of $2.5 million for the fruition of a center that she's been working on and talking about for years. And then also we have Brother Aswad Thomas with us. He is the Director of Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. And I've heard a lot of great things about this brother. And so I thought it was important today to come and have a special edition of Java with Jimmy this afternoon. So please do me a favor, hit that share button. For those of you over on Twitter, retweet this because we're going to have a real conversation about violence at some level on the local level. Numbers are down and whatnot and all of that, but it does not change the experience of where the numbers are very still active. And then we'll get a national perspective from Aswad as well. And so I would like to bring in it first. I call her Rev. Chaplain Clementina Chéry. If anybody objects, feel free to identify yourself in the comments and we can have that talk after dark. And the good brother Aswad, who is with us as well. And so I'm excited to have both of you here. Let's just name that it's not the desire that your life experience has got you to be experts in this place. So let's just name that. And so thank both of you for being here today. Tina, I want to go ahead and Chaplain Chéry, I want to go ahead and start with you, ask you to introduce yourself for folks that don't know who you are, and describe the state of violence locally right now in one word. And Aswad will come to you.
Thank you so much. I'm Clementina Chéry, President and CEO of the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute. We're a center of healing, teaching, and learning for families and communities impacted by murder, trauma, grief, and loss. This is our 30th year in doing this work. Describe violence in one word. That word, I don't like to describe violence. I really want to focus on peace and healing.
Yes,
because violence has been happening even before Louis was killed. And 31 years later, we're still focusing on violence and we're still blaming the young people that were not even born when Louis was killed. So I want to shift from giving attention to the violence to really focusing on just peace and healing for our city, for our country, and for our nation. The right to heal. There you go. Peace and healing. So I want to switch that just a little bit.
And then I'll challenge you back. Usually I'm in deference to you, but since I'm hosting today, describe the status of peace and healing locally in one word.
Survivors.
Okay. Yep. You shot me down. Yes, ma'am. And no pun intended, even with our language. I'm sorry. You got me. Survivors. Absolutely. Survivors. Which is always the priority.
There's a quote that someone said, I don't know who coined the quote, those closest to the pain. And it's families on both sides. We are closest to the pain. Yet because as survivors, we're only seen when it comes to gun control or death penalty or longer prison sentences, we're really not seen as survivors transforming the narrative where we can begin to heal and create the peace of the city that we all want.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Aswad, thank you, brother. Chaplain Chéry has I was there the other day and she was like, is this happening? I was like, if you need something happening, it's happening. And she spoke very highly of you, sir. And so it's an honor to meet you virtually. I look forward to meeting you. We're going to also talk about the event that's coming up as well. And I need to get the links and stuff ready so folks know where to go and register. So please introduce yourself, say hello to the Java with Jimmy family. And I will ask you to describe the state of peace and healing from a national level.
Yeah, no, first, I just thank you so much for having me on here today. Chaplain, thank you so much. It's been a great partnership of ours, right? We've met through, a mutual connection on how I got into this. We're so excited to be on with you all today. My name is Aswad Thomas. I'm the Vice President of the Alliance for Safety and Justice, which is a multi-state public safety organization that works to replace mass incarceration with what we call shared safety. And through our work as an organization that works on public safety, that works on criminal justice reform, we also have a unique perspective on what safety actually looks like. And through our work, we have two programs. One program is our Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice program, which is our 200,000 member network of survivors from across the country, right? So we bring survivors together, we provide support, we train them to be advocates, and we change laws, right? So that's one of our programs, which is Crime Survivors, people who've been impacted by violence. Our other program is called Time Done, which is our 250,000 member network of people living with old records. So as an organization, we strongly believe in order for us to get to safety, we have to bring together survivors and people with records and have them be the ones kind of flying this plane to safety. And so I'm excited to talk more about that work as well. At the national level, one word that I would describe peace in healing is hope. But I also want to describe in one word, where we at with violence as well. And my one word would be devastated, right? While crime has went down every single day, families continue to be impacted by violence, and is devastating to talk with families who just lost a loved one. It's devastating to hear the stories of victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and it changes our lives, right? And this is why Chaplain and I got into this work around those shared experiences of being victims, but changing the narrative and organizing to change policies. So I'm excited to really dive into this conversation as well.
Brother Aswad, welcome. And again, we're glad to have you here. Chaplain Chéry, you focus on the survivors, and Aswad spoke to it. I have to name that one of the people that stands out in my head is Ruth Rollins, who does a lot of active work in, and if I remember right, not to tell her story, she's swung between both sides of the pendulum of losing someone and then I believe allegedly, I don't know where things are, also someone of one of her children taking a loved one. And that's when I really started to hear, and you've talked about it a lot too, but started to hear the coming together of the twofold part of survivors. Aswad spoke to that as well in sort of a macro purview on an approach to safety. And so, Tina, if you could kind of mesh what Aswad said and you two coming together about the focus on survivors, the twofold piece with the macro observation of reentry and things like that. Where are we?
Thank you for that question. I mean, again, we've been doing this work for 30 years. Reentry wasn't reentry. Nobody knew about reentry. Yep. And that, as Aswad says, the crime victims' rights, it's more about us as victims being angry and wanting either the death penalty or longer prison sentences or wanting juveniles tried as adults. That's how survivors have been used traditionally. When Lewis was killed, I needed to know who could raise a child to kill. I needed to reach out to the mother of the young man who was convicted of killing my son. That happened. I met with the mother. He is the son of a former Boston police officer. We met at our local bar, the Blarney Stone. And it was silent tears and a warm embrace. And then we prepared for a victim offender dialogue where I would meet him in prison before he came out. And there was a plan. We really created a plan that was achievable for him, where he had family engagement and community support. And his parole came with conditions and accountability. And so we've been doing reentry before reentry was a reentry. And if you know Milton and Mario and Sammy and all of that,
Yep.
and then we officially created a reentry program. We work with families on both sides of homicide, on both sides of the gun. And in meeting Ruthie, she is doing amazing work. So Oswald, you will also meet her on the 22nd. I mean, on the 26th, 25th. Oh my goodness, my dates. You'll meet all of these families on the 26th. Ruthie has, I call them the silent survivors, because we don't know, were their loved ones victims before they became victimizers? And again, we don't put attention to them because, quote unquote, there's already that stigma.
Yep.
Who's someone who commits crime. Again, when Lewis was killed, that was a narrative. It was a drug deal gone bad. He was known to the police until we switched that narrative. So there's so many of us that are doing the work, especially as survivors of colors, of families on both ends of homicide. And that's why we connected, the work with Oswald and what he is doing made sense. Excuse me, because we were connected by a sister organization, Families Against Violence in Connecticut. Deborah, who does amazing work. And so that's how we connected, and we are all looking at the same thing. We are all impacted, and we can say, if we're talking about public safety and addressing the issue of violence and root cause, we have to lead that narrative. And it's not competitiveness. It's not competitiveness. And that's still the struggle that we have here in doing this work. There are lots of competitiveness. So for me, having Oswald here coming to Boston, being a part of this national platform, it is a vision and a fruition that is coming through for me. So, and again, as survivors of color, we are not at the forefront. It's our white counterparts that are at the forefront, and it's always about the gun control and gangs, and the narrative has to change.
So Aswad, when you, in your introduction, you talked about changing a narrative, and so I want to ask you to speak to that in the context of what Chaplain Chéry just said. But before that, what is the benefit to community and safety of being intentional about the twofold of survivorship?
Yeah, great question. What is the benefit? So I want to share kind of what led me to this work. So long before I became the vice president of this national organization, the top criminal justice organization in the country, long before I became the national director of the largest network of survivors in the country, I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut. I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, in a single parent home. I'm the youngest of 5 boys. For me, growing up in that community, I watched my older brothers and their friends almost walk the path to destruction. So my family grew up in Hartford, Connecticut in the 80s, and then we moved to Detroit, Michigan in the early 90s because my mom thought we were kind of getting away from the poverty, the violence in Connecticut, and moved to Detroit and experienced the same thing as well. So for me, violence has impacted my life for decades. Starting in 1993. 1993, my best friend, Ruben Elder, at 10 years old, was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting when he was only 10 years old. And when Ruben lost his life to gun violence, as kids, I remember us going back to school 2 days later, right? We went back to school. There was no assembly. There were no grief counselors on site. There were no social workers, right? So no support for children, who just lost someone so young to violence. And then in our households, our parents also didn't know how to talk about that, how to support the kids as well of dealing with that grief and that traumatic experience of losing someone so young to violence. In our community, our community really talked about that incident. 30 years later, my friends and I, we really talk about that experience of how that impacted our lives. So for me, losing Ruben to gun violence in 1993, throughout my life, I've lost about 40 friends to gun violence. despite so much loss, despite so much trauma that I've been exposed to and been around, I never imagined that that violence would come knocking on my door.
Mhm.
So for me in 2009, I had just graduated from college. I was the first male in my family to ever graduate from college. That not only was important for me and my family, but it was important for my community, right? I was the one that, that people always said I was going to make it out of the neighborhood, right? And so I graduated from college. I was also a star basketball player as well. And so I went to college. In fact, in Massachusetts, I went to college at Elms College in Chicopee, Massachusetts, where I have very good basketball career. So 2009, graduated from college, had a very good basketball career, signed with a professional basketball agent to start my professional career overseas in Europe. But unfortunately, while I was recovering, while I was kind of training in Hartford, Connecticut, I got shot twice in my back while leaving a corner store in my neighborhood. Right. And, that incident ended my professional basketball career. But like so many victims across this country, the traumatic experience of being a victim or losing a loved one to homicide and having to, live in that same community where you experience this trauma or this loss, it's very devastating. Right. And so, I was released from the hospital back into that same community with no support, in the same community where I was shot, not knowing who shot me as well. And that was the hardest part. It wasn't the physical challenges, which were extremely difficult, but it was actually also the psychological effects of it, right? Something that we often don't talk about is, the flashbacks that you experience, the nightmares, the PTSD, the paranoia, the depression, the stress, the anger, all of these psychological effects that we go through as victims. And most of us never receive any help to one, identify what those experiences are, but also no help to actually heal and recover from those. And when you think about what was the response of the justice system in most of our cases, in
Mhm.
my case, as I was recovering in my mother's one-bedroom apartment, in the living room on her couch. So I spent about 9 months recovering from these two gunshot wounds in my back in a small one bedroom apartment in a living room couch on this old couch that my mom would never throw away for years. Right. So that experience of like recovering from the shooting, but what really kind of changed my life and got me really thinking differently about like the cycle of violence and the need to really support survivors, train survivors, organize survivors, and change policies and laws were two things. And I'll be very quick. Number one was the response of the justice system. Law enforcement came to visit me several times as I was recovering from those gunshot wounds. Every time they came to visit me, it was always about the case. They never asked me how I was doing. They never told me about the victim compensation program that's supposed to, help victims like myself. They never told me about where my family can go to access any mental health services or victim services in our community. But the thing that was most devastating for me is that they never told me that they had a victim advocate that works in their department that's supposed to work with victims like myself, right? So most police departments have a victim advocate that's
Yep.
supposed to work with victims, and they never mentioned that to me at all. And so, my family and I were left to deal with this traumatic experience on our own, right? And so that experience, okay, the justice system is not going to help me. I got no help at all except for my family and Mothers United Against violence that provided me with support. My mom a lot of support during that time period. But also I started to think about who else do I know who experienced victimization, right? So I called my father. My father was shot in his chest in the 1980s. And I remember I called him, I said, hey, Dad, when you got shot, did you get any help? My dad is Jamaican. So my dad was like, boy, shut up, and hung up on me. And I was like, oh, that was interesting. So, after we hung up, then I called my second oldest brother. My second oldest brother also was shot in his back in the 1990s. I said, hey, bro, remember you got shot? Like, what were you going through? He talked about those nightmares. He talked about that PTSD, the depression, right? And I was like, hey, did you get any help? He was like, no, I never received any help. He still struggled from that mentally as well. And then I talked to two of my first cousins. Both were shot. One of them was paralyzed from the waist down. Today, he's still paralyzed from the waist down from that shooting. Asked him that same question. After you got shot, did you get any help? And he said no. So in my immediate family, from my father, my second oldest brother, my two first cousins, and myself, 5 out of 10 males in my immediate family are victims of gun violence. All of us had interactions with the justice system, none that actually led to any help or any services at all. Right. So that's so once I saw that, I was like, it's not just me going through this experience of being a victim and not getting help. My family went through it, and then all of the parents, all the friends who I've lost to gun violence, I started to call them just to check on, see how they were doing. And it was that same experience of not receiving any help at all. And so that was the experience that kind of got me thinking about, okay, it's not just me, it's the entire community that had been experiencing violence with no help. But the second thing that really kind of propelled me to this work was during my doctor's appointment. So during my last doctor's appointment, to remove the bullets out of my back, as I'm getting surgery, my doctor, he's performing surgery. He's he opened me up with scalpels, and he's, digging in my flesh to try to remove the bullets out of my back. And he started to share this story of this teenager who he had treated 4 years before I got shot. And so he talked about, Aswad, you remind me of this other, this teenager who was 14 years old, 4 years, earlier, he came to our hospital. He was shot in his face. He lost sight in his left eye as a result of that shooting. And he started to describe like more physical characteristics about that teenager, right? And so as I'm listening, I'm on the operating table. I just my heart just started to be like faster and faster. And I was like, why am my heart beating so fast? And the more details that my doctor shared about that young man, it was because I was realizing emotionally that he was describing one of the teenagers that had shot me. And I said, Dr. Marshall, can you pause, because you just described the teenager that shot me. And I remember what I was going through as an adult of being shot and being released from that hospital with no support. I couldn't imagine what that teenager was going through of getting shot, now having a physical disability because now he's blind in one of his eyes, having to be in that same violent neighborhood with little to no support. And I strongly feel like his unaddressed trauma played a huge role in my shooting years later. And that's how the cycle of violence continues in communities, right? Because actually not helping people heal and recover, or we're actually not doing the things, we're not investing in the programs or organizations to help stop the cycle of violence that happens in communities.
Aswad, two things before I pose a question to Chaplain Chéry is, well, one thing is, though you do this, if at any point talking about this, you need to, Jimmy, pull me out real quick, say so, do so. We want to give you space for that too. Thank you for transparency and your authenticity. And as much as Tina knows that I've moved in this space for some years, in advocacy, we hear by experience a piece here in June of 19. Some of your experience I heard from someone in May of 21. Part of your experience I heard from someone in April of 2005. To hear it articulated in sort of a chronological, experiential thing is just, it encapsulates a lot of what we've been talking about. Chaplain Chéry, I'm going to jump right to you. And I remember I posed a question like this to Mayor Michelle Wu, and it blew up. And I'm going to say the same thing to you. You've said it. Aswad has said it. We know it. The cyclical of this, the cyclical that comes out of not addressing the duality of survivorship on this road that we keep running on. Rev, where's the off ramp? Where is the off ramp to this societal? Where is it?
Well, we are on it. We've been on the off ramp. We have been in the off ramp since Lewis was killed. Again, We're still dealing with politics. So that's why I'm so excited to be in partnership, because we cannot do the work on a national level. The fact that we have said our message has not changed. It has always been about peace, our 7 principles. We do this work in love, unity, faith, hope, courage, justice, and that F word, not that one, forgiveness. How do we do this work? We are losing at both ends of the guns. Yet, I've shared this with you. The more murder in our city, in urban settings, the more money government gets. So there's an investment in government not really wanting to change that trajectory. We have been on that lane. That's why I am so excited, and I give kudos to Deborah and Mothers United Against Violence in Connecticut. We're sisters organization. If she hadn't shared and she pushed, you gotta meet him, you gotta meet him. She's telling him, you gotta meet her. And I just kept saying, look, if Aswad wants to connect with me, he's gonna connect. I have not pushed it. Yet it happened because Deborah didn't stop. Yep. And so working with Aswad and connecting, that's the platform. And it's going to be harder because now, as people of color, we are coming out. He's pulling us together. So I'm a baby in this. Although it's been 30 years, I'm still a baby in this. So the narrative has not changed. It's not going to change. We are driving it. You're getting the city talking about now healing. That's why we wanted Isaac on this panel, because as that, and we've done this with Dan Mulhern, and we've done this with Dr. Oh my goodness,
Petro.
Yeah, all of them, all of those that are in the city and in public health, they're beginning to shift the language and narrative. Yet we have to change the investment, and that's the policy that we're looking at, to make sure we're also investing in the programs and families. And that's why at the State House right now, the gun violence reform bill, there's a language in there to make sure we're investing in programs that are impacting families impacted by murder. So we are on the lane, and the lane is moving. And now is the important, and that's why appreciating you providing this platform. If you didn't provide this platform, nobody would know. And so the more work that we're doing, the more that we as people of color continue to work and changing the narrative and not buying into the problem, because the problem gets magnified. And what happens if you keep talking about the problem? We keep magnifying the problem. So I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful. I am excited. I'm not going anywhere. And I think this is going to be that opportunity that, again, as survivors, impacted on both sides, because we're surviving the physical, we're surviving the death of someone that was murdered, we're surviving the fact that someone we love is in prison for murder, we're surviving the fact that I'm out of prison now for murder and I can't even get a job, and that record is still a part of me. So we're impacted, and that's the part that we have to begin to manifest. We have to manifest that. So appreciating you for providing this platform that we can change that narrative and amplify the work that's being done in communities of colors.
I one of the things, Tina, I want to make sure that, thank you for that. And you've helped me in a lot of ways of accepting kudos and stuff throughout the years. But I want to make sure, and I'm trying to get they got to email Danielle to go to the event. So I don't have my good glasses on. Danielle at ldbpeaceinstitute.com .org. Aswad, I'm going to be honest, Rev, and y'all can come off and we can have a dialogue.
Go ahead.
Mute. Rev, I to hear you say that we're on the off ramp, coming from someone whose experience and leadership in this space I respect, I was surprised to hear that, because by observation, I'm not as involved directly as I used to be, it still seems like we're on this just sick on the road, what we call in New England, Aswad, the rotary. It seems like we're on it. So it is hopeful and encouraging to hear you say that we are on that off ramp, but due to politics, there's still some pushback. Aswad, based on what Rev just shared from a national perspective, and she's speaking to national, what is it that, and I want to let folks know that on next Thursday, July 25th, from 6 to 8 p.m., if you feed them, they will come. There will be food and refreshment served. And you actually have to reply by today. And so we're going to put Danielle's email address up right now. There is an event. Chaplain Chéry and Aswad are here today to make sure that we highlight that there's an opportunity to Aswad, opportunity to what? What is happening next Thursday evening, the 25th?
Yeah, you know, what's happening next Thursday on the 20th is part of a national effort, right? And so when you think about, you know, kind of once again, us as survivors, we haven't been at the center of public policy making for decades, right? So, you know, in the United States, the way that the United States even like designed crime policy in this country has never been designed to protect people from harm. It's never been designed to actually help us as the victims get access to the support that we need, also to help protect victims as well. You know, since the early 1990s, many of us, you know, we heard about like the 1994 crime bill, for example. That bill was designed, you know, in theory is what they said. This is legislation that's designed to stop crime from happening, and we need to help and protect victims. As a result of that 1994 crime bill, you know, a lot of these tough on crime policy started in California and really swept the entire country of things like 3 strikes law, mandatory minimums, sentencing juveniles to long-term prison sentences, sentencing juveniles to adults, you know, the crack and cocaine disparities of sentencing majority of Black men and women for, you know, at higher rates compared to other races, you know, locking people up for marijuana, right, which is now legal in a lot of states, right? So, you know, in this country, over 36,000 laws were passed in the name of crime victims. They were passed by legislators. They were supported by advocates. They were supported by also the media. Also, they were supported by a very narrow voice of crime victims that don't look like you and I. When you think about who's most impacted by crime and violence every single day, it's not one experience, it's multiple experiences of victimization. It's people that look like just you and I. It's people of color, young people, people that live in communities that's often devastated by violence. But once again, our voice and experiences haven't been at the policy making table at the local level, at the state level, or at the federal level as well. Over these past few decades, you know, we've passed a lot of laws that actually took resources out of our communities to build more prisons, to lock people up. We took resources out of our community parks, our neighborhoods, took resources out of our schools. We took away a lot of jobs, right? And we are still dealing with the effects of those tough on crime policies because we actually took resources out of communities, invested in more prisons, but it actually didn't make us safe, right? And for across the country, at the local, state, at the national level, the voices of crime victims aren't at policy making tables, right? So I have which I would like to say one of the, it's this tough job that I do, but it's also one of the best jobs that I do. I have the opportunity to travel this country to meet with crime survivors from across the country, whether it's Chicago, Detroit, East St. Louis, Miami, Los Angeles. You know, I was just in Charlotte, Newark, New Jersey, New Orleans. I have the opportunity to travel this country of listening to survivors. Through a lot of that listening, what I find out is also very devastating. A lot of the crime and violence that we hear and see in communities, 96% of those victims do not access victim compensation programs. With the victim compensation program is in every state that's designed to help families with funeral or burial expenses, designed to help families access things like mental health services. 96% of victims do not even access that program. 90% of victims do not access any victim services from a state or government funded agency. Once again, the people who are actually providing support and services in communities is the local grassroots organization. Majority of them are all volunteer based, are
Yep.
using their 401ks to help families, are often helping families to go to the morgue, helping people go to the police department, helping people navigate this horrific experience of being the victims. But most of those organizations do not even get any funding to actually do that work at all. And so it's important for us to organize locally at the state level and at the national level to really uplift up what safety looks like to us. So our event next week in Boston is part of this multi-city Right to Heal tour that we are doing this summer as a lead up to our big event in September, which is the first ever Crime Survivor Speak March on Washington. So September 23rd and 24th, we're organizing thousands of survivors, majority from communities of color, from low-income communities, all the advocates, all the organizations that's work with survivors. We're organizing them across the country. We're bringing thousands of survivors, hundreds of organizations to Washington, D.C. for this March on Washington around this concept of a right to heal. Victims' rights has always been closely associated with more tough on crime, more punishment. We're setting this new vision of actually what victims' rights and victim services should look like, and it's around this idea of this right to heal. So 3 things I just want to uplift as it relates to this policy agenda, right? When it comes to, in communities, people actually don't have a place often to go to get access to mental health services and support after being a victim. And I'm not just talking about victims of gun violence. Once again, I travel the country. We talk about victims of domestic violence, victims of sexual assault, especially African American women, are totally disrespected and disregarded across the board, similar to gun violence. Most of us don't have a place to go in communities to actually get help. So what does it look like for all survivors to have a right to go to a place, a center in their community to get access to support and services, right? So that's one of the policy part as part of this right to heal concept, that we need to build this infrastructure of support in local communities so people actually go to get support. Another thing that
let me just name and highlight which the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute is now, and that's why it's important for the full legislature to back this $2.5 million. But go ahead.
Exactly. So what does it look like actually to invest more? And so Chaplain can not only just have one facility or one or staff, that model needs to be flooded all across the state of Massachusetts. Right?
Yes.
We think about that. What if we actually invested that $2.5 million annually, multiple different organizations using that similar type of model? So we need to invest in
impact. Let me just clarify up here. And I don't know what it is nationally. Impactful doing the work organizations, not just organizations that can write a good grant. And
yes,
but Rev, we're not gonna go there.
Yeah, no, listen. I see it all the time. I was just in Charlotte. It was like, what? The city got this thing got this amount of money. Who got the grants? And I was like, look who got the grants. They was like, they're not even doing the work. But that's another conversation. But that happens.
That's after dark, bro.
Yeah, often for sure. Right. So so the right to heal policy is like lifting up the need to invest in community-based organizations, right? Okay. Another thing that we often don't talk about is 2 kind of barriers that exist, especially for victims of gun violence as well. So many families and victims often have to live in a residence that's no longer safe, right? Whether there's a shooting inside the house, a shooting outside of the house, right down the street. Many victims, especially if they are renting, there are not protections in law that will allow a family to safely move away from that residence without having to face a penalty like breaking a lease, right? And many families are like living in unsafe homes where they want to move. It's a very traumatic for them to live in that household, but they can't because they're stuck in this lease. There are current protections for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault survivors to break your lease without any penalty and safely move away from that residence. What we're calling for as well is that we need these type of protections also for victims of gun violence to also safely move as well. So that's like another thing that we're calling for, like this vision of around this right here. Another one I want to mention is, once again, we don't talk about a lot of our experiences in a way that many of us identify with, and it's not just us experiences, it's actually happened to thousands and millions of us as survivors. We talk about a right to debt forgiveness. Many families and victims, after becoming a victim or experience violence, go into a lot of what we call victimization debt. And the victimization debt that often happens where you lose a loved one to violence. Think of how much it actually costs to plan, a very good funeral and burial service for your child. The repast, people actually go into debt, right? Have to bury a loved one. People actually go into debt after losing a loved one, a son to gun violence, where that son lived in that home, that son contributed to that household. How, so it's this like, what does it look like for survivors to actually have a right to debt forgiveness after experiencing victimization, right? So like there are a lot of policy things that we're going to talk about at our event next Thursday. Is about setting this new vision of what victims' rights should look like, and we all should have this right to heal. And we also want this new approach to public safety. This is a lot what we're having this conversation of what's needed, not just in Boston, Massachusetts, but what's needed across the country.
Chaplain Chéry, who should be in the room next week?
Everybody should be in the room. And our guest list, actually, we have about 45 that have RSVP'd. You can RSVP, and the reason we want you to RSVP is you will get the location. We want you to be intentional, and if you want to attend, you are not going to get the location. And for those that have RSVP, you can't bring a +1. Your +1 needs to RSVP. It's a sense of respect that we want this to happen. So we invite you to RSVP. This is going to shift Boston. This is going to show who Boston is. Again, we have some of the advocates. We have our family resource officers that will be at the meeting. They have already RSVP'd. We have the survivors. We have those that are doing amazing work. We have those that are ambassadors. We have other survivors from across the state. We have some of our interfaith community partners. We have from the neighborhood trauma team. I think they changed their name, so forgive me if I don't have their right name. We just have everybody, again, because it's a different conversation. We're not here to promote the problem. The problem is still happening. We are here to shift that narrative and to get those of us involved who look like us, the diversity who look like us, to say it is time for our voices to be heard. And I think the other part of it also, that it's important that we come out and survivors have a platform to make a commitment that we are going to vote. No excuses. As survivors, whether survivors of you're surviving someone that's in prison, or you're surviving someone that was murdered, we are going to vote. We are going to vote. That's the commitment that we're going to make. So everybody should be in the room. And what I don't want to hear, I didn't know you were having this. Nobody told me. That's always our excuse. So I want to make sure that we're not using that excuse. You have a following. We have shared it. We've shared it all over. No excuses. And for those that are listening, please share the flyer, share the link with those that you know will always say, nobody told me. Why didn't anybody tell me? That's an excuse we have when we don't show up.
Yes, ma'am.
So
I'm going to make sure that our Chaplain Chéry has the last word. So Aswad, any closing words, any special invitation that you want to extend to the local community here, directly from you, please do that. And any closing remarks you want to make. I am looking at the schedule right now. I'm like the 20, for some reason, I'm like, why is the 25th ring a bell? But I'm definitely going to try to make my way out, because Rev knows this not as long as her, but probably about a good 20 years. And Aswad, you talked to sort of the cycle of violence. I've went from peer impact to youth worker in that cycle of it, to activist, advocate, to that piece of it, all along my own personal losses, a loss of friends and loved ones, and now to a point to having some influence on policy in this platform, because that's where, you know, it's at. So all of us have probably had about 3 or 4 or 5 good cycles in tears in this thing of violence, getting on the road to peace and healing. Aswad, any closing remarks, and then we're going to have our Chaplain Chéry close us out.
Yeah, when we think about, you know, how does change happen? Change happen when people come together, right? You know, you look at, you know, the civil rights movement, wouldn't have been possible if people from all across the country didn't unite together. So for our work at Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, there's 3 things that we do. We build community. We build community by bringing survivors together. We are a national organization. We have chapters all across the country. I'm excited when we partner with the chaplain to develop our chapter there in Boston. So it's about building community, bringing survivors together. Because that is
hold on. There's going to be a local chapter here in Boston.
That's the goal.
You just named it into existence. Come on now.
That's the goal. We're gonna make it happen. Once again, it's about organizing and changing policy. So building community. We also want to make sure that we're also building the skills of survivors to be organizers, to be advocates, to become public safety experts. So we do a lot of leadership development and training for survivors that want to get involved. We're going to train you how to be a leader to help impact your community as well. But then also the third thing for us, we want to win campaigns. As an organization, we've been able to pass over 100 legislative and public safety reforms all across this country. We've been able to change victim compensation laws in about 14 states. We've been able to move about $3 billion out of the justice system, reinvesting that $3 billion into communities for victim services, for violent intervention, for reentry. And also we've been able to establish 52 of these trauma recovery centers in communities to help people get access to the healing and support that they need. All of our success as an organization, there's a movement that we've been able to build, the movement that we're going to continue to grow across the country, especially with this March on Washington, D.C. event. It started with us just coming together, unifying our efforts, because the conversations I have with Chaplain is the conversations I have with folks in North Carolina, is the conversations we have in Illinois, the conversations we have in Texas. Even though we live across the country in different communities and cities, we're all experiencing the same exact things. But now we have a blueprint. Now we have a blueprint on what's needed to actually get more investments in our communities. And in this country, this is a very political environment that we are living in. It was important for us as an organization, as a movement, to bring our members, our survivors, our organizations that we work with to Washington, D.C. 2 months before the election, which we're very intentional about that, around this idea of right to heal, a new approach for public safety, but also we need to heal the vote. As well. And so it's important for us to unify our efforts to go to Washington, D.C. And I'm extremely excited about that. And it's starting with these little events, tours that we are doing, which I'm going to Detroit tomorrow to do a very similar event. Then I'm going to Chicago right after that. And then I'm coming to Boston. After Boston, I'm getting on the train. I'm going to Philadelphia. Right. So this is work. It's about how do you build this movement across the country? And I'm hitting the ground in communities across the country with my team and I.
I'm excited and looking forward to meeting you, and just encouragement and strength your way, because that organization, and it's funny because often Chaplain Chéry, when I used to be a little hothead, and Tina would, Reverend Chaplain Chéry would always talk about it has to start with community. No, the electeds, no, it has to start with community from the ground up. It doesn't let them off the hook.
Right.
But, and so Rev, you're going to have the last word.
Yeah, I think, Oswald said it all. I think for me, being in a space where I'm not looking to convince people that we have to change the narrative, having someone that's already doing it at the national level. A lot of what Oswald is saying that we need to do, the Peace Institute and the survivors, our survivors network, we have done it. One of the policies is the what are we calling it? The bereavement leave.
Yep.
We're looking to extend it. We amended the state victim compensation.
Yep.
We just worked with Northeastern University Law School that did research on the Massachusetts victim compensation, issued some policies. The Attorney General is going to take those recommendations. So the survivors here, we have done a lot of work. Yet it's great now to be a part of this national model, to say a lot still needs to be on. And for us, is also then challenging the city. When the city gets money, what is our role as survivors to ask for report and then give a report card as to what you are doing? That's why having Isaac in this conversation is important. There is no accountability when government gets money. Government gives report. Since the late Mayor Menino, Marty Walsh, all of them, we are in every city's report, yet the funding doesn't come to us. The funding goes to government, and then government refers to us, and we're in everybody's report. So what I'm looking for and what I'm hoping as we continue to do this, that again, we as survivors can get a blueprint, next steps, to then go back to our city government and said, okay, you said you're going to do this, 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 and this. Give us a report, and then we are going to grade you, because we cannot continue to have government tell us these kids and these neighborhoods and the problem. And the kids, again, were not even born when Lewis was killed, and they're being victims and they're being victimizers, and we're still getting money to do the same old thing with a different twist. What's the definitions of insanity?
Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome.
Exactly. And so for me, this is that amazing opportunity. And again, we are doing amazing work. Having this partnership is now just going to remind people, oh, she's not that crazy woman talking about peace and love and forgiveness and healing and all of that. We have now, and I think what I'm excited about this is usually is women at the forefront. The fact that we have a man, a young man, I'm not going to call you an old man, but a young, because I know you're younger than me, being at the forefront of this, it's again a different way, because men really don't talk about this in a public way, in an ongoing way. And so I'm just excited. And again, I'm hopeful. And we in Boston, we don't give up. We really don't give up. We continue to move. So I'm looking forward to seeing everyone there. And I'm just looking forward for us to continue to build this relationship. So the right to heal. Thank you, Teresa, for just sharing with everyone. Thank you. And we hope that everyone will do the same thing. We hope you register, and we'll see you there on the 25th.
Folks, definitely spread the word about this. If you know of family members, if you know of survivors, we oftentimes, I want to name that the survivors also include those who have been shot, but it wasn't fatal.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And they're living with, sometimes disabilities and challenges, the mental health, the physical and whatnot. So those, I would say, if you all agree, need to be the main ones in the room. And then those that are here and loved ones that remain of those that have been fatal, they need to be in the room as well. And so Allie is in the room, so proud to be a part of this national movement. Anissa is saying thank you. Anissa, thank you for making sure that this happened today. Because she was like, you got to do 12 o'clock for this. When it doesn't work at 9 and we just put you down for 12, you got to do it. So and it was important. Again, when it comes from Rev, we make it happen. But sir, I'm looking forward to meeting you.
Same here.
And Rev, keep me abreast about the chapter.
We're gonna make it happen. Looking forward to seeing y'all in Boston next week.
And we had our co-executive director on, so she heard it. It's in existence. We also have our Survivors Network, Kali, who is the coordinator of the Survivors Network. So, and all those survivors are looking to move beyond Boston. So we are excited. We'll see what comes out.
All right. Both of you, thank you. I will see you all next week. And Rev, just thank you. I wanted to publicly thank you. A lot of people hear about sometimes donations and whatnot. And I often mention it, but it's the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute that makes it possible for us to get some of the level of grant support that we do get. On a Thursday at 4:30, Rachel, one of the co-executive directors, sent me the MOU. And that was like a Thursday at 4:30. The very next day at 12:30, I got a call. James, if you have a 501c3 conduit, we got $5,000 for you because of the work we were doing with around COVID with the platform. And so Tina, Rev, thank you. This shows how many years we go back. Thank you so much for your willingness to even do that and for us. And I really appreciate you. And Allie said, Boston chapter
coming soon. She named it. There you go.
Recorded and it's on the internet. And you heard it where? Announced right here in the job.
There you go. Press. Thank you, guys. See you next week.
All right.
Thank you. See you later.
Hold the meeting you as well. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Folks, that is definitely information we need to make sure that everybody in the community has. Those that are close to, adjacent to, those that on a preventive end don't want to see it happen. You need to be in the room as well. And so thank all of you for being here for a special broadcast of Java with Jimmy today at 12 noon. I wanted to mention something to you because I get a little break before I have to go out this evening. My good friend and brother is in line to be a delegate for the National Democratic Convention. And Jesus knows we need his voice in the building because I'm not even going to go into that. So this evening, the convention dates are August 19th through the 22nd. But there is a fundraiser going on for him. And I will put this, I've shared it on my personal page, but I'll put it up as well. But additionally, I have the opportunity tonight to also be able to celebrate and join the Davis system in their open house for their office. And so just shout out to Aaron and Anthony and the whole Davis system team. It is, and it's funny because often with certain things go on, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm part of TDS, not just a client, but part two. So congratulations to both of them. We'll get information out about the fundraiser. We're looking for folks to donate either $35, $3.50, $35, or $350 to make sure that Anthony gets all that he needs to get and do to be a national delegate at the National Democratic Convention. All right, that's it for me today. Today is Thursday, last show. Today's my Friday. I got a sidebar, Anissa. So Monday, if you all remember, a couple of months ago, I had Swaggy T. On to talk about his experience with cancer, and the commissioner of probation for the Suffolk County of Massachusetts watched and invited him to come and be a probation commissioner for a day. That is taking place on Monday. I was asked to be there at 9:30. We have a show scheduled for Monday. So Anissa will need to text and sidebar after this. We may not be here Monday because I really want to go support Swaggy T as he becomes probation commissioner for a day. Young man who survived cancer. And so it's awesome that he has that opportunity. I've been invited to help capture it along with his parents and whatnot. So we'll let you know about Monday over the weekend. We might have to reschedule Monday's guest. So that's it for me. Have a great weekend, everybody. Today's the last day of the heat wave. I hope everybody's doing their best to stay cool and hydrated. I think that's it. Oh, don't forget Boston Wild Blacks event tomorrow, Saturday at 12 o'clock. Members, you can get there at 11. But the family reunion is taking place on Saturday at 12 o'clock at Lawn on D. And also, I just saw something. Diddy Burger is doing a giveaway. Hold on for 1 second. and they're looking for volunteers. So I just want to make sure I have, this is a pop-up 5 to June 29th. Maybe it's in a story. Giveaway in a city, going for paint, Diddy Burger. Hold on. Okay, so July 19th from 9 to 2 p.m., we are looking for some volunteers to help serve lunch and activities at 112 Southampton Street Shelter on July 19th. And so if you were interested, please contact Dwayne Brown at 857-225-0445 or dbrown at bphc.org. And so he's doing this in collaboration with the Boston Public Health Commission. Dwayne Brown, Diddy Burger will be giving out, serving lunch at 112 Southampton Street, the shelter, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And they're looking for volunteers. And so please make sure you call 857-225-0445 or email dbrown, DBROWN at bphc.org. All right. That's it for me. We'll see you guys possibly on Tuesday at 9 a.m. And have a great weekend, everyone. And I think that's it. I'm off on my Friday. Talk to y'all soon.